Hello everyone. Today is the midterm review session. Let's take a look at the theories and concepts that we have learned throughout the first half of the semester. First of all, this is the format of a midterm exam. We will have 40 questions, and we will have 15 TNF questions, 15 multiple choice questions, and 10 short answer questions. And I will show you the example questions for each. This is an example of a TNF question. So motivation is defined as the processes that account for an individual's intensity, direction, and persistence of effort toward attaining a goal. So what is it true or false? True, right? So this is an example of TNF. Another try. According to Maslow, low order needs are satisfied internally while higher order needs are satisfied externally. That's a false, right? This is an example of a multiple choice question. So let's have a look. During an annual review, Junho made the following assertion: "When I look at myself and my performance, I see that what I have achieved is outstanding and something no one in the organization has the capacity to undertake. Surprisingly, it has not won me the admiration of my colleagues like it should be, like it should have. I also believe that I do not just deserve a raise, but need one, since without me, let's face it, the place would simply fall apart." Which of the following personality traits best describes Junho's personality? It's a narcissism, right? This is, a simple question of multiple choice. Let's try another question. Yuri wants to become the head of the HR department, although the role comes with a generous salary and will put her in charge of several subordinates. She is mainly pursuing this position because she believes she can do the job better than anyone else and wants people to know this. According to McClelland's theory of needs, which of the following needs is Yuri's primarily driven by in this case? It's a need for achievement, right? So she pursued this position because she believes she can do the job better, and she wants to achieve it, and everybody knows about this, right? So that's a need for achievement. All right, this is an example of a short answer question. All right, according to the Big Five model, blah blah dimension addresses a range of interest and fascination with innovation. What is it? It's openness to experience, right? So you need to remember some very important concepts, the words, right, to make it right. So these are the topics that we're gonna cover for the midterm exam. So we have 5 big topics, right? What is OB, motivation, attitude and job satisfaction, perception and decision making, and personality and values. We have many theories and concepts for each topic here. So let's go through the theories and concepts together and review those and prepare for the midterm exam. What is OB? So first of all, we learned about the definition of OB, right? What's the definition of OB? Basically, OB is the study of various factors that influence the individual thinkings and behavior in an organization setting. The various factors are like individual level factors, group level factors, and organizational level factors. And why do we need to learn organization behavior? Because we want to increase the effectiveness of organization. That's the purpose of learning people's thinkings and behaviors through organizational behavior, right? So we need to understand that the clear definition of organizational behavior. A systematic study of behavior. Organizational behavior applies the methodology of a systematic study of behavior. So we treat behavior as something that we can predict, right? So we have an input, a process, output framework, right? So we basically think that through understanding the inputs and process and output, we can actually predict people's behavior. So that's a input, process, output model and framework, and that's the systematic study of behavior, the systematic approach of studying behavior. And we learned that input, process, output that relationship can be sometimes changed because of the situation, right? We learned that in some culture, the input and output relationship, because of the culture, the input, process, output relationship kind of changes as well, right? Remember, I gave you an example of like email monitoring and people's acceptance, right? There's the same input, but actually because of the different culture, people's acceptance about the email monitoring was changing, right? That's a situational factor. That's a good example of situational factor. So the in behavior study, there's no absolute, very few absolute. We need to understand about the impact of situational factors, right? Evidence-based management. When we manage organizations, when we manage people, it should not be our management decision should not be totally based on our intuition or just our perception and belief. We should not do that. We have to apply the things that we learn from systematic study of behavior. So we apply the things that we learn from organization behavior, and we have to make a decision based on the evidence of a systematic study of behavior. So that's evidence-based management. And there are many disciplines that contribute to the organization behavior. First of all, we talked about the psychology, right? Psychology, we borrow a lot of theories and concepts from psychology to understand people's individual level behaviors. And 디서플린 부터 다시 가겠습니다. 디서플린부터 다시 가겠습니다. Disciplines that contribute to the OB. We learned that there are many disciplines that influenced the study of organizational behavior. We borrow many theories and concepts from, for example, psychology and sociology and anthropology. Right? Psychology, the individual level factors. The theories and concepts about individual factors. It's based on psychology theories and concepts. 자, discipline부터 다시 가겠습니다. Disciplines that contribute to the organizational behavior. We learned that there are many social sciences disciplines and that influence study of organizational behavior. For example, psychology help us to understand the people's thinkings and behavior, and the social psychology, right? It's more about. 자, 다시 가겠습니다. Disciplines that contribute to the disciplines that contribute to the OB. We learn that many different social science disciplines influence the organizational behavior. For example, psychology, social psychology, and sociology and anthropology. All those things helped us to understand people, how people think and behave in organizational context, right? Especially psychology help us to understand people's behaviors and thinking at individual level. 다시 갑니다. The disciplines that contribute to the OB. So we learned that psychology, social psychology, sociology, anthropology, all those things helped us to understand people's behaviors and thinking in an organizational context. Especially psychology help us to understand the individual level factors, the influence of individual level factors on people's behaviors and thinking. So individual level factors are like personalities and values and their cognitions and stuff like that. That's a psychology topic. And social psychology, it's still psychology, but it's about people's interaction, right? So social psychology help us to understand the group level factors that influence people's thinkings and behavior. So group level factors could be the group properties and team interaction and communication and people's relationship and stuff like that. We're going to talk more about those after the midterm, right? And sociology and anthropology, that's more about the organization itself, but it's more about macro organizational behavior. So that's not the main focus of this class. We already talked about that. Challenges and opportunities of OB. We have many changes, environmental changes in today's business world. So there are many challenges. Also, there are many opportunities for the field of organizational behavior. So what are the challenges and opportunities of OB? Responding to economic pressure. Economy is not that good nowadays, and so basically in the bad economic situation, basically companies need to retain good people. Although they cannot pay a lot of money, they have to retain good people, right? So how can we do that? Organizational behavior help us to have a strategy for that. And globalization and diverse workforce, same thing. We have more globalized working environment. We need to work with many different people, people with different cultural background, ethnic background, different values and genders, and all kind of differences. How can we make people work better together, right? How can we help our employees to work together with the different 자, 글로벌라이제이션부터 다시 가겠습니다. Globalization and diverse workforce. We have a lot of changes in our working and business environment nowadays. We have more globalized working environment. We need to do the international business, right? So we need to understand how to work effectively with the people with different cultural background and ethnic background and different, different value and different gender, different expertise. We have many challenges here. Organizational behavior help us to understand how to effectively work with people with different backgrounds. So that could be a challenge, and also that could be opportunities of OB. Enhancing creativity. Especially in Korean organizations, right? Enhancing creativity, increase the creativity. Innovation is a big issue nowadays, and how can we make our organization more innovative? Basically, we need to make people to be more creative. That's what we need to do, right? Organizational behavior help us to do that. Basically, we organizational behavior scholars research about when people start to behave creatively, when people start to think creatively, right? So based on that kind of research results, we basically apply our learnings and theories to the working environment. By doing that, we can actually enhance the creativity of organization. That's what we can do. And networked organizations, nowadays we work through internet, right? We don't work like face to face all the time. We work through internet, through emails, and it's all networked nowadays. And when there is when people work through network, it's convenient, but also there are many challenges as well. It's very difficult to manage people, right? How can we motivate people, right? That's very a big challenge in nowadays in networked organizations. So that's a big actually topic in organizational behavior nowadays, and that could be a big opportunities for organizational behavior. Okay, this is let's talk about the motivation. So there are many theories of motivation. We already learned about that. 자, 모티베이션 theory부터 다시 갑니다. Okay, motivation theories. we will learn many different theories about motivation. So the first four theories are early theories of motivation. Hierarchy of needs theory. We are already familiar with that theory, right? It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Low order needs and high order needs. You need to know what those are, and what's the main focus of hierarchy of needs theory? If people are not fulfilled with the low order needs, the high order needs cannot satisfy them. Basically, that's a main focus of hierarchy of needs theory. So you need to understand that. Theory X and theory Y. That's the basically leaders' perception about employees, right? Theory X, basically, it's a view about employees that employees do not want to work, and they try to avoid work. That's a theory X. Theory Y, it's a theory about people. Like people can sometimes enjoy work and they want to work sometimes, and that's a very they focus on the positive side of people. So that the how leaders see employees really influence employees' motivation, their working behaviors and their morale. So that's very important. That's very important to know. A two-factor theory. The two-factor theory is a motivation factor and hygiene factor, right? 저 two-factor theory부터 다시 갑니다. Okay, two-factor theory. There are two different factors, right? There are the motivation factors and hygiene factors. What's this theory is about? Let's take a look at this slide. Okay, so we know that the traditional view about satisfaction or motivation, it's a one dimension, right? But the Hertzberg's view, Hertzberg, who is the inventor, a developer of two-factor theory부터 다시 갑니다. Okay, two-factor theory. There are two different factors, right? Motivation factors and hygiene factors. Traditionally, people thought that people's satisfaction is just one dimension, right? If people are very satisfied, then people are not dissatisfied, right? So that's one-dimensional view. But Hertzberg suggested that there are two different factors, right? The motivation factors goes from no satisfaction to satisfaction. A hygiene factor goes from no dissatisfaction to dissatisfaction. So if people are satisfied with the hygiene factor, that means it's a decrease of dissatisfaction, but that doesn't mean the increase of satisfaction. So that's the two-factor theory. And we know that motivation factors are more like intrinsic factors, right? It's more related to work itself. The hygiene factors are more extrinsic factors. That's something that people can get from like external environment, right? Or reward and stuff like that. So the two-factor theory help us to understand efforts to understand the different factors that really plays in the people's mind and people's motivation process. McClelland's theory of needs. There are three. It's individual differences, right? People have each individual have different tendencies. So need for power, need for achievement, need for affiliation. So all those three things, people have different levels basically, and those things really influence our motivation in certain situation. For example, if the work itself is it's pretty challenging, and you know, McClelland theory of needs부터 다시 갑니다. So McClelland's theory of needs. There are three individual differences factors, right? The need for power, need for achievement, need for affiliation. Everybody has different levels of each needs, and that really influences people's behavior in certain situations. For example, if the work is pretty challenging and requires some responsibility, people with high need for achievement are more motivated to work for that kind of work because of their because of their individual differences and need for achievement. 자, need for achievement부터 다시 합니다. McClelland's theory of needs. So it says that people have individual differences in three dimensions: a need for power, need for achievement, and need for affiliation. Right. So those three different needs really influence people's motivation in certain situations. For example, when work is pretty challenging and requires some responsibility, people with high need for achievement are more motivated to do that. Right? We learned about that. So that's McClelland's theory of needs. Now we can talk about the contemporary motivation theories. Self-determination theory. Basically, people want to control over their behavior. That's self-determination theory. It focuses on people's intrinsic factors, the importance of people's intrinsic factors rather than extrinsic factors. Cognitive evaluation theory is a sub-theory of self-determination theory, and he says sometimes even sometimes extrinsic factors can even reduce people's intrinsic motivation. So that's a cognitive evaluation theory. A self-concordance theory, when people have a good fit between their goal and their task, then people are more motivated to do that. So that's self-concordance theory. A goal-setting theory. It's a very specific goal. goal setting theory부터 다시 갑니다. goal setting theory. A very specific and challenging goal with feedback. Those can increase people's motivation. That's the goal-setting theory. It's a very simple but very powerful theory, and we talk about why a challenging goal is more motivating, and we learned about task characteristic and goal commitment can actually moderate the relationship between input and output. goal setting theory부터 다시 갑니다. A goal setting theory, very specific and challenging goal with feedback can motivate people, right? That's a goal setting theory. It's very simple, but very powerful theory. And we learned that why challenging goal is important, and we learned important situational factors like goal commitment and task characteristic, right? We need to understand that. Self-efficacy theory. self-efficacy theory부터 다시 갑니다. self-efficacy theory. Self-efficacy is basically people's confidence about doing things, right? When people have a high self-efficacy, they will put more effort and they can actually get better achievement, then they can have even higher self-efficacy, right? That's a positive spiral thing going on here. So it's very important to help employees to have self-efficacy from the beginning. So then how can we increase self-efficacy from people? How can we help people to have self-efficacy? There are four different ways, right? It was like vicarious modeling, self-efficacy theory부터 다시 갑니다. Right, self-efficacy theory. Self-efficacy is basically a confidence, people's confidence about doing things. So when people have high self-efficacy, they will put more effort. So that they can have higher achievement, better achievement. So they can have even higher self-efficacy. So that's a positive spiral thing going on here. So it's very important to help people to have a self-efficacy. Now, how can we do that? Four things, right? Inactive mastery, vicarious modeling, verbal persuasion, and arousal. So we need to remember what those are. Reinforcement theory. Reinforcement theory is it's basically controlling people's behavior through consequences, right? So we can control people's behavior through positive consequences and negative consequences as well. So that's we learned four different types of controlling behaviors, and we need to understand that. The expectancy theory. This theory is talking about three different links, right? So from effort to performance, performance to reward, reward to value, right? When people have a strong link in their mind, then people will be motivated. That's expectancy theory. We need to understand what that is, and I think thinking about examples can help you to understand. the theory better. Equity theory. Equity theory is it's about people's comparing habit or behavior, right? So that people basically compare their input versus output and others' input versus output. 자, equity theory부터 다시 갑니다. Okay, equity theory is about people's comparison, right? People compare their input versus outcome and others' input versus outcome. So if there is an inequity, then people do something or think in a certain way to justify the inequity. That's an inequity theory. The organizational justice, when people actually judge their the fairness of their organization, they think about three different things, like process, outcome process, and the interaction. So that's a distributive justice, procedural justice, and interactional justice. So interactional justice is also covers informational justice and interpersonal justice. So that's the organizational concept. So we need to understand all those three dimensions. 자, 이 슬라이드 처음부터 다시 갑니다. Attitude and job satisfaction. There were three components of attitude, right? It's a cognitive component, affective component, and behavioral component. You need to understand what those are. When people's attitudes and behavior do not match, people feel uncomfortable feeling. That's a cognitive dissonance, right? So when people feel cognitive dissonance, people do something to do something with the 자, cognitive dissonance부터 다시 갑니다. Okay, cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. When people's behavior and their attitudes do not match, people feel uncomfortable feeling. That's a cognitive dissonance. When people feel that, they do something to reduce cognitive dissonance, right? So that through that people we can actually kind of predict people's behavior. There are some important situational factors, also called moderators, right? The reward of the behavior and the importance of the behavior and the controllability. All those things can moderate the people's the cognitive dissonance to a behavior link. Major job attitudes. Attitudes are important because attitudes can help us to predict people's behavior, right? Through knowing people's, for example, through knowing employees' attitudes, we can actually predict employees' behavior and performance. So that's why we need to understand employees' attitudes. So job involvement. What is job involvement? How much people identify themselves with their job. That's a job involvement. And how much people identify themselves with the organization. Their organization is the organizational commitment. And psychological empowerment. How much they believe that they can influence their job. Basically, they can control their job. That's a psychological empowerment. And perceived organizational support. How much they believe that the organization really value themselves, right? How much the organization value themselves and care about themselves. That's a perceived organization support. All these major job attitudes leads to a certain behavior. For example, like better performance or better organizational citizenship behavior. So that's why we need to care about this. We need to understand the effect of this job attitude as well. So everybody knows what job satisfaction is. But job satisfaction, there are many different factors influencing job satisfaction, right? Of course, pay is one thing, but job condition, age, personality, culture. There are many different factors. So if we understand, excuse me, job satisfaction부터 다시 갑니다. Right, job satisfaction. Everybody knows what job satisfaction is. There are many different factors influence job satisfaction. Pay is one thing, of course. Pay, also age. Personality, culture, job condition, like CSR type of thing, and all those things influence job satisfaction. We need to understand the factors and responses, right? When there's high job satisfaction, people, for example, perform better. They engage in higher organizational citizenship behavior, low absenteeism, all those things. But when there is a high job dissatisfaction, then people react in 4 different ways, right? Very active and passive, and very constructive and destructive way. 4 different 2x2, right? 2x2 matrix. We have 4 different types of behaviors. We learned about that, so you need to understand that. In perceptions and decision making chapter, we learned many interesting concepts, right? Very many interesting concepts about our thinking tendency, right? A fundamental attribution error. It's overemphasizing internal factors and 다시 갑니다. In perceptions and decision-making chapter, we learn many different interesting concepts about people's thinking tendency. Fundamental attribution error. When we judge others' behavior, we tend to overemphasize their internal factors, and we kind of neglect the influence of external factors. That's a fundamental attribution error. And self-serving bias. When there's a success, that's because of me, and if there's a failure, it's because of others, other factors, external factors, right? That's self-serving bias. Attribution theory. Attribution theory. We there are 3 factors influence our attribution about internal factors or external factors when we judge other people's behavior, right? It's a consistency, and 자, attribution theory부터 다시 갑니다. Okay, attribution theory. When we judge others' behavior, whether that's because of its internal factors or external factors, there are three things that influence our judgment, right? It's a consistency of the behavior, or distinctiveness of the behavior, or consensus of the behavior, right? All those things influence our judgment about other people's behavior. So we need to understand those three things. Shortcuts in judgment. When we judge others based on just one characteristic, that's a halo effect. When we judge others with the characteristic that the person belongs to, so we basically the group's characteristic influence our judgment about the person belong to that group. That's a stereotyping, right? And contrast effect is the when we compare two people, right? This one person is very good. The next person is it's not that bad, but we tend to think it's very bad because one person, the first person is. The contrast effect부터 다시 갑니다. 아니, shortcuts in judgment부터 다시 할게요. Shortcuts in judgment. When we judge people, right? We cannot see every aspect of people, right? So we tend to take the shortcuts in judging people. That's a shortcut in judgment. First thing is a halo effect. We judge people based on just one characteristic of that person. That's a halo effect. And we judge people based on the characteristics of the group that this person is belong to. That's a stereotyping, right? And contrast effect is when we see like the difference between first person and second person, the difference become very distinctive, and we kind of like misjudge people's quality. That's a contrast effect. We also learn that culture can affect people's attribution tendency, right? We learn that the Eastern people tend to attribute external factors, but actually Western people tend to attribute internal factors. That's because of the cultural difference here.